On today's episode of Hollyweird Paranormal. The date is June 16, 1959. LAPD arrives at 1579 Benedict Canyon to find the body of George Reeves, aka Superman, with a gunshot wound to his head in his bedroom. Investigators immediately labeled his death as a suicide. However, many close to Reeves believe that his death was a murder. Could there have been a Lex Luthor hiding in his bedroom that night? Or could it have been depression that became TV Superman's kryptonite? Or was it a jilted lover, Tony Maddox? We also discuss the strange occurrences causing tenants of his former home to move in and then immediately move out. This is the true crime and paranormal aftermath of Superman, George Reeves. Hi guys, welcome back to Hollyweird Paranormal. We're your hosts, Tammy Merhab Chavez.
I'm Bryce Mitchell-Williams.
And welcome to episode 3, guys, where we're going to be talking about Superman, the death of Superman, George Reeves. So I like to call him the OG of the Supermans because he was pretty much the first one to don like the cape and everything. And portray Superman on television in, the early 50s. So for all of you guys that have no idea who George Reeves is, George Reeves was pretty much the first actor to portray Superman on television. He was the first one to pretty much don the costume with the cape and the S, and then eventually it was passed down to several other individuals to portray him on film and television, but definitely no relation to Christopher Reeves.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Because I didn't know who he was before we started doing this.
Right.
And researching for today.
Yeah.
So I was like, are they just keeping it in the family? That seems so crazy. Nope, no relation.
No relation.
It's
weird. But it's a funny coincidence.
I know.
It is a funny coincidence. However, if you were a baby boomer, if you're a baby boomer and you're listening to this podcast, and you would say, oh no, I remember watching him. And I know that they played The Adventures of Superman on Nick at Night. I don't know if you remember Nick at Night.
I remember it, but because they would also do Are You Scared of the Dark? And
right.
I very much was scared of the dark. And so I would turn it off because I was too afraid. So I didn't know they played it on Nick at Night.
Oh yeah, they played it super late. And I remember staying up and doing homework and watching those episodes, and my dad would always pass by and say, oh, I used to watch that when I was young. And I'm like, wow, Dad, you're really old.
You're really old.
You're pretty old. But you look good still.
Thank you. I love it.
So pretty much, guys, what we're going to do is we're going to first off, talk about George Reeves as a person, get to know him, especially for all of you guys that don't know who he is. And we're going to pretty much talk about how he got into the position of becoming Superman, and pretty much the demons that, followed him into his death. What a lot of people claim was his suicide, or for those that were very, very close to him, his murder. So first off, George Reeves was actually born George Kiefer Brewer on January 5th, 1914 in Woolstock, Iowa. And George Reeves grew up mainly in Pasadena when he was, I want to say, 10 to 11 years old. He moved with his mother, Helen, to Pasadena, and Helen was a very overbearing and possessive mother, very controlling, which is why they had so much tension growing up, and he really didn't have a really good relationship with his mom as he got older. So it was Helen, her second husband, Frank Bacello, and of course, George Reeves. And just an FYI, Jack Warner, who was his manager, was the one that gave him the name George Reeves. So we go into 1937. George is just a natural actor. He is fetched up at the Pasadena Playhouse, which is an incubator for many Hollywood stars such as Charles Bronson and Gene Hackman, even Dustin Hoffman. And George was pretty handsome in that strapping, jut-jawed, manner that he slayed the ladies of the Depression. So these ladies were we're going through this terrible time right now, but oh my God, look at Bay with the chiseled chin.
He'll get us through.
He will get us through with his, strapping good looks. So he signed on to Warner Brothers and then to Paramount, and then they kind of pimped him out to play one of the Tarleton twins in Gone with the Wind. So that was his biggest break. So
a little indie film.
Just a little indie film.
I've never heard of it.
I never heard of it, but if you guys haven't heard of it, it was like the Titanic back in the 30s. Like my heart would go on, Clark Gable would go on,
Oh man, he will.
And I will not go hungry again.
Out of my way.
No, not go hungry. So that was his biggest shot to fame right there. And while shooting Gone with the Wind, he ends up marrying his first love, which was Eleonora Needles. And then, of course, 1943, World War II hits. He serves and is given the opportunity to act in Army training films and stars in a war movie. So he really isn't actively, fighting.
He's a little weirdly common back then.
It was, yeah.
Whereas, like, you can help the effort by doing, like, USO shows, like, help the boys.
I know.
So if you were, like, famous, you were in the Army, but not, like, in the trenches, you know what I mean?
Right. And did you notice how like a lot of these stars that were in the military like looked so good and like so coiffed?
I know. I know.
They were like really well dressed and coiffed back then. Like, man, going into the military makes you look that good.
I know. Noted.
So he stars in these war movies and then he tours with the military to promote the film and the training film. So he comes back to Hollywood in 1951. He divorces Eleanor. It doesn't work out. And Reeves attempts the film industry again, but hits a wall due to the recession when he is struggling to get work. And at this point, it's not just him. It's all actors are struggling to get work. The studios are retrenching. They're even ditching their big name stars to save a lot of money. And then, as fate would have it, he meets the woman that will forever change his life. He meets Toni Maddox, which is the wife of MGM's bigwig producer, Eddie Maddox. And just a little FYI, Toni and Eddie's marriage is an interesting one, and they have what many would call an agreement. Let's just put it that way. So Toni meets George. They're both smitten. They're crazy about each other. Toni is 25 years older than George, but George is like, I don't care. Like, she's hot. So it becomes an open affair. What they have is just an open secret in the business that Reeves had been conducting a long-term affair with Toni, and Eddie is playing along with it. Like, he doesn't even care. To the point, they end up doing double adulterous dates with one another. I guess that can make sense. Like, Eddie...
Like, he had his mistress, she had George Reeves.
They're going out to eat with each other's lovers together.
What do you even talk about? That's so crazy. No.
I'm trying to think, like, what would you talk about?
What'd you do today?
We locked each other. Well, we were locked in the bedroom for a while, and I don't want to know anything else. Perfect.
Just a lot of nodding and smiling.
A lot of nodding and smiling,
drinking,
and cutting of the steak, and like aggressive feeding.
Oh, that sounds like my worst nightmare.
I know. It just sounds like an awkward Tinder
date. Too waspy for that. Just like, it's fine. It's fine.
I don't know. If I was like the mistress to Eddie, I would be like, can you bring the rest of the bottle of champagne here?
100%. I think what you do is at that point you talk to the other, so like you talk to George Reeves because he's the other man,
yeah,
you're the other
you
woman.
Can connect with them. It's like, what do I do with my hands?
Oh God.
What do I even look? Can I
eat
look
a
at you?
you couldn't eat bread, I'm sure. So
I would, most likely eat my feelings and drink my feelings at that point.
I love it.
So pretty much, Eddie and Toni have this arrangement. They're, doing their own thing. And it's kind of funny because, like, they consider themselves a very strong Catholic couple. It's like, I love how they throw the word Catholic into it, but then they save it by saying, oh, but we always remain married. But they never remain, committed or faithful.
Right.
Amen. So...
when there's a will to find a loophole, you will find a loophole.
Yes. And in Hollywood, there were a tremendous amount of loopholes.
So many. Basically, I just feel like just don't get caught. At that point, like, if you don't get, like, caught in a tabloid scandal, anything goes.
Anything goes.
And then the second it becomes, like, public knowledge, you're done.
Yeah. And it's so funny how even back then news traveled so fast Like word of mouth was just like their form of Twitter, you know, except they didn't have hashtags. They were just like, well, did you know? Or did you hear?
A simpler time.
Here it's like hashtag unfaithful. And there was like, well, did you know he's unfaithful?
I love it.
So Tony becomes George's sugar mama, which is weird because here's the thing, like George was not close with his mother, but in a way it's like he finds his motherly figure inside Tony. Because Tony showers him with gifts, and I'm not talking about a box of chocolate or a tie. It was like, here's a Rolex, here's a Jaguar. So Tony ends up buying him an expensive car. She buys him a Jaguar, and then ends up buying him a house in Benedict Canyon. And then there were even weeks where Tony would stay for days, months, and weeks at the house. And then even George would stay days or weeks at Tony and Eddie's house.
Whoa.
They would wake up together, have breakfast with Eddie, and sometimes his I'm telling you, like, it was just a very...
If someone wants to buy me a house, I am amenable to that.
I know. Yeah. I mean, here.
You're married. I'm not. So in
You're
fairness,
not, I
have
know.
a lot less strings to worry about.
Exactly. You know, I don't have to pay taxes. I don't have to pay rent. I don't have to pay utilities. I might help with, you know, garbage and disposal.
Yeah.
That's included. Oh, then that's...
You get breakfast out of it?
You get breakfast out of it.
That's great.
And maybe your laundry done.
That's crazy.
I know. What a perfect setup.
Oh, man.
Bryce is like, what am I doing wrong?
I know. How do I get this set up?
So, they were even in talks about getting married to one another if Eddie were to die.
Whoa.
So friends very close to them would, you know, tell tabloids, yeah, like they would start planning their wedding. Like, oh, this is how I would want it. This is the type of dress I would wear. This is where we would have, you know, our wedding, things like that. Like they were completely committed. So the year before Reeves's death, he abruptly ends his relationship with Mannix, with Tony, leaving her for the younger New York socialite Lenore Lemon, who is, in my opinion, kind of personality-wise resembles and mimics Paris Hilton.
Oh.
Yeah, she doesn't, I mean, she is a brunette, but it's just her, like, she sees money, she goes for it, pretty much. So here's a little tidbit about Lenore Lemon. She is, by all accounts, a bit of a hellraiser. She's a hard drinker and hard partier, which is why her and George got along so well, because George was a big drinker and he was into partying in all aspects, and she gave as good as she got and had the dubious distinction of being, or had been, the first woman to be thrown out of the New York's famous Store Club for fist fighting.
Get it, girl.
I know.
Really?
She got some grit, pretty
Claim
much.
your spot in history.
I know. She's classy as fuck.
I love it.
She also had a reputation as being a gold digger, having been married twice before for money.
Whoa.
She even rubbed elbows with the famous mobsters Bugsy Siegel and Mickey Cohen, and their chemistry of her and George was just completely undeniable, but their relationship was very, very rocky. So one minute they're very affectionate and very lovey-dovey, and the other minute they're at each other's throats.
Sure.
So for Toni Maddox, she's not taking this very well. She's very upset, and rightfully so. Like, you buy this man a house and a car, you spend so many years with each other, you're pretty much saying I love yous. There's a lot of invested emotions.
Yeah.
And she is older, so she's left for this younger piece of meat, and pretty much.
Yeah.
So for her, it was very, very humiliating because, you know, she was dumped by this younger man for a younger woman, and Reeves immediately moves Lemon into the house that Tony bought for them. Which is even more fucked up. I would, if I was Toni Maddox, I would Real Housewives, flip a table.
Yes.
Do all crazy stuff. I would be that crazy lady. So 2 months before George's death, and I want to just pretty much lay it out to kind of piece this puzzle together so people are not asking, like, why, you know, the sudden death all of a sudden. So George was battling with a lot of personal demons, and he wanted out of the Superman show, and he also was getting older. So he wasn't getting taken seriously as a serious actor because people just noticed him as Superman.
Yes.
So due to his Superman persona, his depression increased, his drinking increased, and his gambling increased as well. So on April 8th, Reeves lost control of his Jaguar and careened into a cement pillar near his home in Benedict Canyon, and he was lucky to escape with head injuries that required him to take powerful painkillers right up to the night that he died. So this is important information because this also plays into his murder / suicide / whatever you want to call it.
Murdy Suey.
In Hollywood, that's how you call it, I guess. The accident was rendered in a more sinister light when Reeves' mechanic discovered that brake fluid in the car had been drained. And had the usually diligent actor neglected to maintain his prized Jaguar properly? Or was this a senior moment he had? Or as some had suspected, a murder attempt by Tony or Eddie Mannix. But things were starting to pan out for him in some ways, having the film industry give him a shot in the big film Into Eternity. So he had that under his belt, and then he had a major pay increase after he threatened his TV producers of The Adventures of Superman that he was ready to walk out unless they were to pay him more. So back then, he was getting paid, I think, close to $1,500 or $1,800 a week, which is nothing.
Right.
When you had these amazing actors getting paid close to like quadruple what he was making, even more. So he was ready to walk out, and they said, no, we'll give you an extra pay bump, as well as giving him the opportunity to direct episodes of the show. And the show was even going to be traveling to Australia to do a major tour because they had a humongous fan base out of Australia. So they were ready to do that. And then it leads us to his death. So cliff notes, around 2 a.m. in the morning on June 16, 1959, 2 police officers arrived at 1579 Benedict Canyon, and the house Reeves had been living at with his, new fiancée, Lenore Lemon, during the previous few months. So Lemon had called them after she and her party guests had found Reeves dead in his bedroom. And those guests were neighbors Carol Von Ronkel, her lover Robert Condon, because Homegirl was also married, so she also had to have another side lover, and another neighbor, William Bliss. So due to their advanced state of inebriation, the party guests were not entirely coherent, but they all seemed to agree on the same suicide story. So at around midnight, a bad-tempered Reeves had marched downstairs to yell at the trio for their noise before returning upstairs. And he ends up fighting with Lemon and then with Bliss. George grabs a drink, calms down, and ends up joining the party. He chats with everyone, brings out his acoustic guitar, and even sings him a ballad before heading up to his bedroom. Minutes later, a shot is heard. This is documented from the friends. And this shot is heard from George's room. And Bliss rushes upstairs to find George naked, back on his bed, feet on the ground, with a gunshot wound to his right temple. And on the ground between his feet was a Luger pistol. So police arrive 40 minutes after a call was made. So they arrive immediately to the house, and they immediately rule it a suicide, and they immediately do an autopsy, which is kind of odd. So soon after, George's mom, Helen, hires a PI and requests a second autopsy, which showed that Reeves's head and hands showed no signs of gunshot residue or powder burns. Even if the actor had not placed the gun to his head at point-blank range, as is usual in suicides, it should have left some obvious marks on his forehead and burn marks on his right hand, not to mention his right hand was injured from another accident, and he was under the influence of painkillers. So how was he able to pull the trigger, and how was he also under the influence of, one, having that nightcap and pain medication to be, in that state of mind of, I'm going to kill myself, because it was a clean shot.
Right.
It was clean. And not to mention that while investigators were in the room, pretty much looking for any sort of evidence, they noticed, one, they found a gunshot on the ground, like a bullet hole in the ground, and then they noticed that they found another gunshot too on the upper corner of his room above the molding of the ceiling. which if he was, if he did shoot himself in the right temple, it should have been parallel and would have hit, the direct wall, not at an angle. So that is pretty much all in the air right now. People are kind of confused. Did he, do this all on his own? Was this something, that was caused by his depression, or was it a murder?
Well, and I think too, one of the things that I always found so weird is that as I was like reading about this, is later the mother, she didn't believe that it was a suicide. So she really starts not only the controversy,
right,
but just like the question of like, okay, but why do all these people's stories like almost word perfect sound the same?
Exactly.
They were all super intoxicated, so it was really hard to get a statement in the first place. And then all of a sudden, like, they all signed this statement, like it must be true. So then she's the one that starts financing like the reopening of the investigation like a couple of weeks or months later. And then they start finding these things that don't add up. Like, why are there defensive wounds all over his body, like bruises, and like, why didn't the coroner catch that? Why wouldn't they have made note of this? Like you were saying with the burns and the hand injury and the body bruising, like what are these things? And that second investigation was also ruled like inconclusive. So it's like, again, not that the second one created all these answers necessarily.
Yeah.
But just like, I think that's where the questions start being raised. Like, wait a minute. Maybe this mom is right, and they did not have a good relationship. So it's like not even that she's a very reliable narrator. She like lied to him his whole life, essentially.
Right.
One of the things I was reading is that she told him that his I think his dad had killed himself, and then he found out like as an adult that he wasn't dead.
Oh my
Isn't
God,
that crazy?
that's so messed up.
So they do not have a good relationship. So it's not this like loving mother,
no,
like crusading for like the loss of her son. It's like this woman he was very estranged from.
Yeah.
And even she is like, I have some concerns.
Yeah, I have some questions.
Yeah, so it's so crazy because basically they didn't, as a general rule, do a lot of gunpowder testing at that time. It just wasn't that common. It was like a new science, essentially.
Yeah.
So you could rule that out, like, well, they just didn't do that. But for something so specific, like a suicide of someone who was famous, you would think they would explore every option. And it was like within hours, they're like, great, this is a suicide, wrap it up. And I think a lot of people, especially in the industry, were not buying it. And I think that's where the questions start like popping up, is like his close friends, his actor and producing industry type friends, like, this doesn't seem right. There's something not sitting very well with us.
Oh yeah, he had his manager, his friend, what was his name? Evan Thomas was a really close friend of his, and Evan Thomas, will later learn, has a lot of receipts of, what may have been the most probable cause. But we'll soon discuss that, because you're going to pretty much take us to church time with 40s Hollywood industry talk. So for a lot of these actors, guys, and even actresses in Hollywood, they're dealing with a lot of personal demons. But aside from that, they're dealing with demons in Hollywood. And I mean, I'm not talking about like this battle between heaven and hell. I'm talking about like really evil producers, executives, everything.
Well, I think it goes back to, and we, now we've said this a couple times, but I think it still rings true, is like all of this stuff that's happening now, with the Me Too movement, with all these allegations that are being proven very true. This is not our first trip as a city or as an industry to this rodeo. This has been going on for decades, since the inception of this industry. It's different. The beast has changed its face, but it's still the same lurking problem in this industry, especially. I don't know if it's just because we can't get away from our past, but this is not a new problem. And you can see, especially in the like 30s and 40s, how rampant that, golden era of film But the dark side of that is so nefarious.
It is. It was so, like, severe.
Yeah.
To me, like, back then, it was more corrupted.
And, I totally think that is more corrupted.
Yeah.
I think it went more privatized, if you will.
Yes.
So I think what you can say that the story arc of control in Hollywood has transitioned from lots and the production companies having the power to less of that and more individual producers having the power. There's still that power struggle, that like constant dynamic that is being abused, but you don't have actors being owned by studios anymore. It's now individual producers. So that I think is better. You're not just a number to a corporation. It's not right still.
No.
But you can look back, and I think one of the main things, there's a little quote I was telling you about before, and it's just on the Wikipedia page, but just the one sentence, and it just says, they lent him to producer so-and-so for a project. And just that, like, slave language of, like, yeah, you can borrow him, you can have him, we'll, like, let you purchase him. And it's so crazy because I personally know of more examples of women that this has affected. You look at Judy Garland, you look at that era, Shirley Temple, all of these like young starlets through the modern era, all of these women talking about their experiences being abused, being assaulted, all of that. So for it to be happening to a man in this time period is so fascinating to me. I think it really shows you the scope of the problem.
Right.
So in essence, he, especially like you were saying, he comes back from the war and is looking for work, and there isn't very much.
No.
And so you're essentially at that point studio fodder. He's in a lot of B films. He was in movies with Ronald Reagan, like Western B movies, like, and you're doing a lot of like commercial type work, and it's how he got Superman.
Yes.
Which, you know, at the time he booked it was sort of seen as like a fall from grace. He had done mostly film work up until that point, and television wasn't the way it is now. It was really seen as like lesser. It was super corporate. You're selling ad space that the main characters would be like holding up to the camera during the script. He's shooting an impossible filming schedule. Like, it's just not a great, like you were saying, he wasn't getting paid that much.
No,
initially.
It was a lot of work for little pay, and it's still like that today.
I mean, yeah, totally. I mean, we are in the golden age of television, so I think it is switching, but there's still some holdouts from that. And they essentially controlled him because of that. He didn't have enough money to get out from under that. He also had a huge, like, problem handling his money with gambling and all of that, so that didn't help. But he didn't have like just tons of options, and it really was that situation where like if you ruined your contract with one studio, it wasn't like you could skip across the street and go to another studio. And that, I think, is the advantage we have now. I think the phrase "you'll never work in this town again" no longer applies. With the ability to create your own content with things like YouTube or podcasting or play or anything, that no longer applies. But back then, someone says you'll never work in this town again, you will never work in this town again. It's a very real threat with very real consequences, especially for someone who doesn't have enough money to buy his own things.
Exactly.
His house, his car, his clothes.
No.
You are essentially indentured to these studios, and then they're telling you what you will and won't act in. And so for him, as he starts getting older, you know, and again, no one knew that Superman was going to be a success. So once that happened, it did sort of shift that power dynamic a little bit. Like you were saying, he had some things coming up. He had started his own production company, and he wanted to direct and all of those things. And even with that, he's really trapped in the clutches of the studio, essentially. They won't cast him as anything else because he's making the money as Superman now. So it's like this weird situation, like damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like, you're not making money without acting, so like I guess take the work that you need the Superman money, and then you can't escape it like they get you coming and going essentially, and it's so crazy to me. And then like that never went away. Basically, it's just like, well, yeah, there's people who are still doing that. You look at like Nicolas Cage basically takes any movie, and people are like, why does he take such bad movies? He's in mountains of debt and can't say no to the paycheck.
Exactly.
As one example.
Oh,
so it's
yeah.
like,
it's just all paycheck. He just wants a paycheck.
And he's not the only one. And again, that none of these situations that we're seeing in the news today are new.
No.
They've all been repeated. They've all happened before. It's just layers of sediment that we keep building upon. Like, you can look at George and see his career, and it's mirrored in actors today. It's so crazy.
It's still like that, and it's so funny because you are right. Today, performers, and you yourself, you're an actor, and you know. Yes, you are.
Book me for Superman.
For George, if he wanted out of Superman back then, it was a no. If he was doing Superman today, say like Superman was this new show coming out, and he already had a season or two under his belt, they would have either killed him off or had hired another Superman that looked identical like him. Like when a lot of performers, especially in shows that are very, very successful, they want out of their contract. Well, okay, fine, you want out, we're going to kill you off.
Yep.
We're going to give your character cancer, and your character's going to die. That's it.
Yep.
Or your character's going to go away. Something's going to happen to him. So that's how they pretty much handle those types of productions nowadays, and how they handle performers nowadays.
Yeah, and it is very sad. And, you know, again, I think it is changing. I think that's no longer quite as common, I like to think. But those echoes still very much, you know, sort of bounce around the industry, where it's like, yeah, in a perfect world, you're not getting taken advantage of by a producer anymore, but we can see that that's not the case. Like, it's so funny. I keep bringing it up. I think it's just because I'm so obsessed with the sort of story arc, if you will, of the Me Too movement.
Yeah.
I think it's such an important point in history for this industry and for women in general across all industries. I think we're really, hopefully, looking at a time where, like, enough really is enough, and like we will no longer keep allowing these things to happen. I'm very hopeful for that. One of the things that I find so fascinating, I was reading about Peter Jackson's comments regarding Ashley Judd, and as many of us know, she was like essentially the first person to come forward and accuse Harvey Weinstein, and basically she was saying, and if you read her like actual letter, that like it essentially ruined her career because no one would hire her. Yeah. And then Peter Jackson talked about Lord of the Rings, and that she was like on the short list. They wanted her, and that he didn't even realize that she was being blacklisted. That's how subtle it was, because someone just super innocuously in the meeting said, you don't want to work with her. She's very difficult to work with.
Yes.
And he was sort of taken aback by that, and he had met her a few times, I believe, and was like, oh, I didn't get that impression, but if that's what you say, like, great, she's off the list. And just that quick, you're out of one of the biggest franchises in film history. And she said that when she read that interview with him, that she was so heartbroken but so validated at the same time, because it gave voice to the fact that she knew it was happening. She couldn't stop it because she couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from. And, you know, he was saying, I had no idea that anything had happened between her and Harvey Weinstein, or that she was accusing him or might accuse him. This is, you know, now 10, 20 years, 15 years ago. It was just that quick of, oh, no, she's difficult to work with, don't hire her. And then she wasn't. And it's so crazy that we're still, that is still a thing that can happen. So, you know, again, I keep bringing it up, but I think it's so fascinating that we are at a point where people are saying, like, no, this cannot keep happening. And, you know, if you look back to the 40s especially, all of these people, you look at the Rock Hudson story, you look at Judy Garland and the after effects of that, and how much control the studios had over them, and just the personal hells they were living through because of it. The drug addictions and the gambling problems and the alcoholism and the insane sexual taboos that they were participating in just to like feel some small sense of control. It was just everywhere. They were all so trapped by it.
No, you're right. And I mean, it gets to one point where they don't even feel like human beings. They just feel like a piece of meat or a piece of property.
They 100% were. I mean, it's so crazy. And, you know, it's so weird as someone who is a struggling actor, like, you kind of do get it. Like, oh, yeah, I guess I would put up with a lot to be, like, financially stable or famous or successful or whatever the blank is for you personally. So you can kind of understand, like, well, but I'm famous. This is what I wanted. Like, this is the price I have to pay. And then your personal life is just in shambles because you can't be who you truly are.
Yeah.
Because a studio executive is telling you, like, you don't get to do that.
It's not even a studio executive anymore. It's PR.
Totally. Oh, my God.
It is. I mean, I have friends. I can't say where they work or else they'll get in trouble. But they do work in PR for entertainment.
Man.
And every time I read something about a couple going through a divorce, I would always mention it to them. They would always tell me, do you really believe that? I could tell you that that's all staged. Yeah. That's in 100%. A contract. I think even E! had a show based on it with an actress who was up and coming, and they told her, you have to be with another actor, and here's the deal. You guys are going to be married for 5 years. We're going to pay you this much, and then you're going to have a kid, and then you guys are going to divorce, and this is how much you'll get paid after the divorce. And you'll go off and do, you know, your big things, and he'll go off and become famous, and both of you would have your big careers, and it's done. Yep. It's a deal. You know, it's a product that they're always a deal. And I'm just so shocked, too. Even working in this industry as a costume designer and stylist, too, I hear it from a lot of actresses. There's this one actress I was fitting, and I remember her getting a text in the middle of the fitting, and then she looks over at her manager. She has a disgusted look on her face, and she looks at her manager, and she's like, he's texting me again. And I overheard her say, you know, he wants me to come over tonight to hang out with him. Ugh. And you could just tell, like, she just didn't feel comfortable. And I later find out it was this producer that wanted her for this film. Ugh. Yeah, and we were styling this girl for a magazine. She was in this big Showtime show, and she was really sweet, really nice. I think she had just turned 20 years old.
Ugh, that's so cool.
And I even heard, too, that the producer wanted her to come over for drinks.
No,
20-year-old.
Don't go.
20-year-old. A 20-year-old for drinks. And then what? At 9 o'clock at night at a stranger's place. Yeah.
I mean, you are not safe in that situation.
No, it was like an immediate no.
You don't know. Like, did you ever watch that show Smash?
Yeah.
There was one scene where the lead in it goes over to the director's house and, like, sings Happy Birthday, Mr. President to him. Do you remember that? And that scene made me so angry.
Right.
It's like, why would you go over to someone's house that you don't know by yourself alone at night? And it, like, gets her the part. I'm like, this is a horrible message to be sending.
Right.
Like, yeah, do it.
This is how ambition works, ladies. Like, no, it doesn't.
She, like,
it doesn't have to work like that.
Sassy remark, and she walks out, and I'm like, this is a terrible message to be sending. That, like, this is okay. And I'm sure that's not. You know, it's a great show. I actually really enjoyed it, and I don't think that's the message they're trying to send. But, like, that is the best possible scenario. Most likely, that's not how it's going to end. That you're going to walk out unscathed. At the very least, you're going to feel incredibly uncomfortable. Oh, that makes me so scared.
It was very scary. I could just tell, like, the look she gave her manager, and the manager, like, in response was like, absolutely not. Thank God.
Thank God for that manager. Good for them.
Good for them. No, they were a good group. Like, I remember, like, talking to her manager, and I also remember talking to another agent that was there present during the shoot. And she was just a nice girl. She was up and coming, and she even, like, had aspirations of being a singer. Like, she had plans. But what about the other girls that don't have that? That's what I was thinking. You know, they don't have this support group around them.
Or, and this is so unfair to lump them all together, but I always think about, like, show parents.
Oh my God.
Just willing to sell their kids for any...
Have you seen that documentary?
Yes.
I think it's on Netflix about that apartment complex that is literally 5 minutes from here.
No. What is this?
Oh, I can't remember the name.
I thought you were going to say the Amy Winehouse documentary.
Oh, no. I can't remember the name of it. Oh my God. It's I think it's like on the cusp of Burbank and Studio City, but it's an apartment complex where all these big stars started off, like when they were kids. Yeah. They started off there, and it's for pretty much families that they have a child or children that want to make it in the industry. Oh, no. So they stay in this complex, this community, and they have quit their jobs or they have left their families in, Lord knows where, like the Midwest, the South, somewhere, and they've pretty much traveled with their child to LA, and they're living in a 1-bedroom apartment in this community, and all they do is pretty much send their kids out to auditions, train them, pretty much, make them work, around the clock each day, just so they can get signed with Disney, just so they can get signed with Nickelodeon, and just so they can get signed anywhere. But, I mean, it's really sad because it's like, this is their life. They've pretty much are sacrificing everything for the future of their child being in this industry.
And that's so scary because I think when your mindset is like, get signed at all costs, you're willing to risk safety.
Right.
To do that, and that is so, I mean, Hollywood is too predatory. You have to, like, you need people protecting you and, like, looking out for your best interest, because it's, that shiny lure is so hard to say no to sometimes.
Yeah.
And you need people to say, like, you're not doing that. So if your parent isn't even the one protecting you, I just think, oh man, those poor kids, I just hope they're okay.
In my opinion, George was a natural actor, and he did it for the art. He was talented from the very beginning when he started out in the Pasadena Playhouse. And I remember even reading in between, auditioning, he would still participate and audition for shows at the Playhouse. But in 1950, I think it was 51 or 52, Tony pretty much pushed him to audition for Superman. He gets the part and doesn't think anything of it. Superman is like a B show, TV show. But then it gets huge, especially for children between the ages of 4 and up. So when he dies, it was a major blow to his audience. It was really, really sad. There was a picture of this little boy in tears with his Superman cape, and he's looking down on the floor and he's crying. He has the newspaper article, Superman's dead. It's so sad.
Well, and he took that so seriously, too.
George
Reeves quit smoking because of the show.
Yeah.
And he, like, really embodied and was, like, one of the first, like, role model celebrities. Like, he didn't delineate between his, like, personal... I mean, he did a little bit. Obviously, there was a lot of, like, skeletons in his closet, but he really embodied that persona for his fans. He really, like, encouraged them to believe that he was Superman.
Yeah.
And I think that's so sweet that, like, he gave up smoking, like, at a time when nobody even thought smoking was that bad. Like, it's just so sweet. Like, he really cared about his audience, even though he might not have cared that much about the project itself.
The audience meant a lot to him in the show because they were, just made up of innocent children. Yeah. And they weren't, corrupted. So let's move forward with the suspects.
Yes.
There's a ton of them. Not a lot of them. I mean, there's probably like 3 or 4 of them.
3-ish, yeah.
Yeah. So we are going to start with Eddie Maddox. Eddie's exploits in covering up the sleazy underbelly of Hollywood were legendary. As portrayed in the films such as Hollywoodland and Hail Caesar, Eddie had an array of thugs, bent cops, private eyes, mobsters on his payroll. So no scandals were too big to be neutralized by Eddie, from covering up Clark Gable accidentally killing a young actress by the name of Tosca Rowland, to tracking down and buying every single copy of porn that starred Joan Crawford. So he, in my opinion, I feel like he's the dude that came up with the saying, make it look like an accident.
Yes.
That's just how I see him. If anyone could put heat on Superman, it was Eddie. So was he responsible on behalf of his wrong wife for the misfortunes that had befallen our Reeves in the run up to his death? And was Eddie a man suspected of killing his first wife, Bernice Fitzmaurice, behind the bullet to the head that ended the actor's life? Quite possibly, you know, anything for his second wife, Tony Maddox, which there is a lot of shade with this man because he was married to Bernice Fitzmaurice, who mysteriously died. And the reason behind this is, and I know that this guy was behind her murder because she was ready to divorce him and leave him. And all of a sudden she is shot down. And, you know, same thing with George Reeves. He was ready to leave. Well, he already left Tony, but he wasn't ready to leave Lemon to make Tony happy and be with her. And everything was going to go back to the way it was. No, he was ready to marry Lemon. The second suspect is Tony Maddox. Mobster Mickey Cohen once described Tony Maddox as the only person in Hollywood who ever had any balls. So when George Reeves spun his long-term mistress for a younger model, she did not take it lying down, and Reeves himself was convinced it was Maddox behind a string of strange incidents that had befallen him in the aftermath of their breakup. So he was inundated with menacing silent phone calls at all hours of the morning and night, and someone even abducted his beloved dog, Sam.
Sam, no.
When you involve animals...
That is wrong.
That is so wrong.
Cut my brake lines, but you leave my dog out of it. Oh, my God.
When you bring animals into it, you take it to another level.
Yeah.
So it was bye-bye puppy Sam.
No, Sam.
And it was no wonder Reeves asked for a restraining order against Mannix, but that didn't help at all.
No, of course not.
So there could have been... you know, a discussion between Tony and Eddie, like, what can we do to take care of this? There's an option right there. Lenore Lemon. I like to put her on a list called This Bitch.
This bitch.
This bitch is crazy.
She is crazy.
This bitch is a gold digger. This bitch has some problems. Okay, so according to Evan Thomas, who is a very close friend to George Reeves, Lenore Lemon was having an affair with a heavyweight lawyer named Ed Bennett Williams.
They're all just sleeping with
everyone.
Like, nobody's faithful.
I know. What's the point of getting married?
Just do it.
Just do it. Yeah, just pretty much, you know, skip the wedding. Don't even bother with rings.
No.
Just
go at it like rabbits. Carry on.
Let's have an open understanding. How about that?
Oh.
So Lenore Lemon met Williams at a New York City hangout. And let's just put it this way. She educated him on the nightlife and the bedroom.
Ooh.
Yes. Girlfriend did not play. So Williams was the least sophisticated guy you ever met. And Lemon referred to him as the freshman, considering that he was also 20 years older than she was.
Whoa.
Lemon was pretty much a hussy because Williams was also a married man, but adultery was the name of the game during this time, as we, you know, earlier discussed. And after Reeves died, Thomas said that Lemon called Williams. So,
First?
Oh yeah, because Williams is the celebrity lawyer who, if a celebrity was in trouble, he was the first person to call. Help me get out of this.
Whoa.
Let me see what I can do. So she calls Williams and tells Williams Superman is dead. Superman is dead. And Williams instructs her to call the police and keep her mouth shut.
Oh.
And Thomas further adds that Lemon promptly told the police she had fired the pistol while fooling around before Reeves had killed himself when they asked about the bullet hole on the ground, which was another thing that was found in the investigation. There was that bullet hole in the floor. Where did it come from? They questioned her about it. She had the right answer. Case closed.
You know, just messing around with a gun.
I was just messing around with a gun. I was like, do you press this trigger?
No
you
suspicion at all. That checks out. Carry on. You're free to go, ma'am.
So then Thomas goes on in this article and says, only Lemon can turn a suicide into a homicide. Thomas finds this out through mutual friends that were present at their house that night. So this is all being told to him, I think, by William Bliss. And after Reeves' death, Lemon breaks into the house, which is already taped off as a crime scene. She takes $4,000 that was supposed to go to their honeymoon and jets out of town and goes directly back to New York. She marries Jacob L. Jackie Webb, who is the great-great-grandson of Cornelius Vanderbilt, who was a part of the Vanderbilts, which is one of the most wealthiest families at this time in the United States. So
she's clearly heartbroken.
She is so devastated. She needs like $100 bills to wipe off her tears, pretty much. I know.
I need that too. Oof. I'm sad.
I'm sad. I cried, all the way into Jackie's arms. Wow. So this bitch marries Jackie, and 8 days later leaves him, but remains married to him. Jackie's like, but the sex are great, Can we just stay married just so we continue to be physical? Oh, yeah, for sure. So Lemon goes ahead and somehow is able to marry another person, and that is musician Hamis Menzies. And she remains married to Menzies, but she still is able to sue Jackie, who had moved on to another woman, had forgotten about Lemon, forgot to divorce Lemon before marrying this woman. So Lemon's like, oh, I'm gonna pretty much sue you and charge you for bigamy.
Oh my God.
Yes. So I feel like Homegirl's like ahead of her game here. She knows
what's up.
She knows what's up. When money's involved, she knows what's up. But her time runs out, So what ends up happening to Lemon? She ends up dying old and alone in a small New York City apartment due to natural causes. Okay. She's penniless. She's an alcoholic. And her body isn't found until 5 days after her death. Oh. She died old and alone.
That's sad, but also karma.
I know. Karma.
Ugh.
It doesn't pan out for her very well.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That is insane.
So who is your money on?
My money's on Lemon.
Is it?
I just immediately think it was Lemon. Like, I just felt that, and it was even depicted in Hollywood land.
Yes.
Because if some of you haven't seen it,
it's very good.
It's really good. I think that Diane Lane did a superb job.
Oh, she's just the best.
Oh my God, Adrian Brody was amazing. Bob Hoskins, who plays Eddie Mannix, was flawless. But I felt like Ben Affleck really didn't capture Reeves' spirit. He looked the part,
totally,
but I don't think he was 100% in it, in my opinion.
For me, he was the vehicle of the story because, like, it's about his character.
Right.
But I was more interested in the other characters. Like, right, he was kind of like the straight man in a sense. Like, I didn't really care that much about, like, and that's not true. I cared about the story of him. But, like, for my money, like, Adrian Brody and Diane Lane were just, like...
flawless.
Crushing it. So it's like you couldn't take your eyes away from them in a sense.
I know. Diane Lane is one of my favorite actresses. I think the only two movies I like Ben Affleck in were Chasing Amy and Mallrats. Those were the only two I like. But other than that, I felt that the Affleck duck would have done a better job.
I love
especially with that transatlantic, like, 4 days talk.
Yeah.
But with Ben Affleck, it just sounded like he was struggling, like, I'm cracking like a duck or something.
And it's hard to, like, get the image of him as Batman out of
that's another freaking thing. Like, I can't. I don't know. For me, it's always Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer will forever.
That's your guy.
That's my guy.
I love it.
That's my guy. I just liked him. No, I loved him as Batman.
Yeah, so. He's good. I didn't really like him as much when I was growing up. But then as an adult, like, rewatching, I was like, oh, I was an idiot. Like, what was I thinking?
What were you thinking?
I don't know. Such a foolish young lad.
But I thought it's just Lemon. I just thought that what may have happened, and this is another thing too, that even Evan Thomas said in an article with one of the friends that even shared this with him. And I think this was William Bliss, who was there present that night. He said that Lemon followed Reeves up to the room. A gunshot was heard. She comes rushing down, immediately telling them, tell him I was downstairs. Tell him I was downstairs. I think I think there was a scuffle upstairs. I think it's just that she's such a tough girl.
Yeah.
She even got physical with him in some situations. Friends of theirs even said, like, she would always, either push him, slap him. She was really aggressive with him. I think maybe she was going after the gun, threatening him with the gun, and maybe the gun went off, and it was an accident.
Interesting.
Yeah, and she also had Williams, who was her side hussy, her freshman that was on standby, like, for any...
Ready to cover.
Ready to cover.
Interesting.
That's just, to me, all my money's on Lemon.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think it's a mix. I don't know that... I think a lot of times these types of situations are, like, some kind of amalgamation, and then, like, the truth will never really be known. The reason I think that it's possible that she wasn't acting alone, I think she might have pulled the trigger. I don't think she was acting alone because of the brake line incident, which is such a classic mob type move. Cut the brake lines.
Right.
That's the only thing that gives me, like, a little bit of pause. So I wonder if it's some kind of hybrid of, like, the ex-wife paying her off to do it, or you know what I mean? Something along those lines of, like,
that is
maybe
true.
Because she's such a money grubber too, and he wasn't that wealthy, honestly.
No,
he was fine, but
he was comfortable.
He was not, like,
but not
Hollywood
Lemons.
royalty. He was, like, middle class.
He was
Hollywood wealthy, which is still very wealthy.
He wouldn't afford to buy that house on his own and drive that car.
And so I just think maybe she could have been bought off.
That is such an interesting take on it.
Just because I don't think she seems, to me, clever enough or focused enough. You know what I mean? She kind of always has these people in the shadows, like the lawyer. Kind of, she would not have been clever enough, I don't think, to come up with her own alibi.
No.
That has the lawyer's fingerprints all over it. I don't think she would have been clever enough to murder him in cold blood and, like, plan a party and all of that. That just seems so thought out. So I just wonder if there's, like, she might have been the lightning rod, but I think that there are other players in the wings that kind of helped guide her a little bit.
So there was not just one Lex Luthor, there were several Lex Luthors.
Bringing it back to Superman.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, a little that's what you call innuendo.
I just think that she seems, unless it is just random and they were fighting and her temper got the best of her, that is definitely a likely possibility. But because it was a series of events that led to this point, I just think, like, there was more at play than we'll probably ever know. And there's a lot of allegations much later. So his ex-lover, what was her name? Why am I having such a hard time with that? Tony Mannix. She had Alzheimer's, and up until the day she died, she was recorded as, like, confessing to priests that she did kill him.
Stop.
She would pray out loud to God and to George Reeves for forgiveness. So again, how much weight can you give to the ramblings of an addled mind? I don't know. Whether that is someone under a truth serum, you know what I mean? It's like if mental illness steals your memory, then she could just be rambling what someone else had, like, said to her, and that's what she's remembering.
But that's pretty intense.
Or is she telling the truth and she's not lucid enough to remember that she's not supposed to be saying it?
Right.
Who knows? Again, I don't think you can put that much weight behind it, but the fact is that she did, quote, confess. Not, it would have never held up Catholic confidentiality and all of that, and whether or not she was even of her right mind, but she died confessing, quote unquote, that she had done it. So again, do I think that she is the one that, like, ordered the hit? Maybe. I think that there is a mixed bag of blame to go around.
Like Mickey Cohen said, she's the only person he knows in Hollywood that had balls.
And you don't cross women like that.
Exactly. I mean, this woman was able to get Eddie Mannix to be her husband, and Lord knows.
And she was like an ex-showgirl. She wasn't that famous before she married him.
No.
And then she sort of becomes this like dame of Hollywood, like baller. Love it.
I know, which made for such a good just a good plot of the film.
Totally.
Yeah, it was just no wonder this was made into a film. It just had everything to create this big soup of plots, pretty much.
Well, yeah, and it's still technically an unsolved murder.
It is.
Which is so crazy.
That's why and it's so funny you say that too. You feel like it's a murder. I felt like it was a murder too.
Yeah,
we both do. And a lot of people deem it as a suicide. No, it was a suicide. He had a lot of demons. He was dealing with, alcoholism. He had depression. He had all these, issues.
Yeah.
Maybe. But that's another thing that I hate that people do nowadays. It's, he had a, mental health disorder. So that was the reason, and we're going to write it off.
Right away. Yep.
Right away. We see this with Marilyn Monroe.
Yes.
We see this even with Kurt Cobain. There's a lot of people that, do not think he committed suicide. They felt that it was, a plotted murder. Who knows? And the reason why people are debating about this is because someone's not telling the truth. Whether it was an accident or not, or it was premeditated, someone still, has not come out with the truth. And I don't think we'll ever know.
No, I don't think we will either.
No.
So let's wildly speculate.
Yeah, I know, wildly speculate. But we could speculate on this. We're going to go into the paranormal aftermath of George Reeves' death. I know people are like, get to that part.
I know. Stop talking.
I want to hear about some hauntings.
Scare us right away.
I know. So for all you paranerds out there, the house where Reeves died stands a short distance up Benedict Canyon Drive in the dense hills and narrow, meandering lanes north of Sunset Boulevard. So within a mile is Cielo Drive, where Charles Manson's robots massacred Sharon Tate and her friends in August of 1969. And then, of course, in the mid-90s, we had Heidi Fleiss and her string of escorts from a well-concealed house some way around, right around the corner from his house. Oh my God. Isn't that insane? Isn't that insane? It's like, it's just this combination.
Don't ever go in the hills. That's the moral.
Just Charlie and I know not to buy anything there. We just know just to avoid it.
Smart.
It's fine.
Smart.
Reeves Maddox estate was taken over by Toni Maddox. Lemon tried to claim it, but it wasn't in her name, so there you go. So Toni decides to rent it out and later learns that the renters are not staying at the place too long. So they move in, and within several weeks, they end up moving out.
Whoa.
Immediately move out. So here are the documented stories from the couples that have moved in and moved out. So one couple who had rented the home stated that strange things immediately started to happen after they moved in. They were hosting a dinner party, and out of nowhere they heard what sounded like a commotion upstairs, followed by footsteps, and then later a gunshot.
No.
I know. So the male guests of the party, being strapping lads that they are, rushed upstairs to what is George's room, and find that the furniture in the room had been rearranged. Items were laying all over the floor like someone had trashed the place. And then there was a heavy scent of gunpowder in the air.
Nope.
Yes.
Pack your bags, because you are not staying in that house.
Yes, they felt that someone had broken in, but they noticed that nothing was missing. They were looking for any signs of a break-in. They were even looking for, a bullet hole. Like, it was a very strong scent of gunpowder. They didn't process, anything else. They were just like, okay, maybe, we drank a little too much whiskey or something. But then more occurrences start to happen. So their German Shepherd would then refuse to enter the room of George Reeves. And at times, he would stand guard at the foot of the couple's bed as if something or someone was outside of the bedroom. So the dog would begin to bark at the door. They slept with the door closed, and as he would get closer to the door, he would whimper and back away, as if something scared him that was on the other side, like said something to scare him. He just said something that was just no bueno.
Oh my God.
So until one night the couple woke up and saw a strange man standing at the foot of their bed at 2 a.m., which caused them to not even think twice to move the hell out the next day. Yeah. So what this sounds like, too, is also a residual haunting. When you hear or see something in a repetitive motion, it's residual. Like a videotape that is constantly being rewounded. It's just energy that was absorbed there, negative energy for that matter, just replays over and over again. It's not an intellectual spirit. It's not communicative. But then there's other allegations too that state, no, some people believe they've made contact with George.
Oh my God. So
another couple documented, once again, what paranerds call residual haunting. And they would constantly hear gunshots going off between the hours of 1 a.m. to 1:20 a.m. in the morning, coming out of George's room.
Oh my God.
So here's another side tidbit too. Benedict Canyon is made up of primarily bedrock. Bedrock is one of the most natural foundations that, or structures that holds and retains energy.
Really?
We see this in the first episode of the Sharon Tate murders, and now we see this with, his home in Benedict Canyon. Wow. And this was such a violent death that he suffered. So that environment absorbed all that energy, and it's just replaying and replaying. Followed by the shot was a very, very strong smell of gunpowder. And it got to the point with them, that the gunpowder got so overwhelming that they ended up moving out.
Oh my goodness.
They felt like, was it a gas leak? No, it was gunpowder.
Yeah.
Then, as the house would lay vacant, police were constantly being called over to the property. So they were being called to the property by neighbors due to complaints of what sounds like commotion leading up to a gunshot. One police officer even stated that he saw a figure of a man standing on the roof with a cape.
Oh my God, what?
Yes, at 2 a.m. in the morning. Yeah. So, these are all documented events. They've been written down in an article. Another place where many believe George haunts is the Pasadena Playhouse, which is it was his second home.
Right.
It was very much his second home. The Playhouse has what workers claim to be a precocious spirit.
I feel like all theaters are haunted.
I know.
So
it just comes. You want a theater? It comes with a ghost.
Haunted,
Let's put a ghost in this little closet here.
Yep.
Done.
Done and done.
So this precocious spirit, they claim, likes to play a lot of jokes on the actors and the workers. So people sense being tapped or touched on the shoulder. Items will be moved around. People's keys would move around as well. Things would go up in thin air, like things would disappear. Yes, some believe it could be the spirit of Gilmore Brown, which was the founder of the Playhouse. But in life, Gilmore Brown was very serious. However, Reeves used to be a big joker on the set of The Adventures of Superman. So that's why they believe it's Reeves, because Reeves used to pull a lot of jokes on his other cast members on set. So it could be he's an intelligent spirit going back and forth between two places that he's very, very familiar with.
That's crazy.
Isn't that insane?
And apparently one haunting's not enough. You have to haunt two places.
I know. But they could do it. They're energy.
Right.
They could probably, teleport to different time periods. I mean, Lord knows. Yeah.
That's crazy. So do you know, is there anyone living there now?
Currently, there's a gentleman living there now. He doesn't like to be interviewed.
Sure.
And based on what he has told other, parapsychologists and paranormal investigators, that there's nothing here. I don't see anything. I don't feel anything. Okay. So he's very dismissive with those types of individuals that come in. Yeah.
Interesting.
And if you see the house is like 25 minutes from where we're located.
Oh my God.
I think it's 10 minutes away from the Sharon Tate house as well. But I've seen pictures of the house and it doesn't look like homeboy keeps it up very well.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, there's weeds. There's like, it just doesn't look like it's been updated in a very long time. So,
I mean, I think too, part of it is if you're like not open to, like, I think you can explain things away. So even if something is happening, he might just be like, no, I'm not acknowledging that.
Right.
Or he's like not home when it happens or something.
For a lot of individuals, you know, especially parapsychologists, they believe there's people that are open and people that are not open to the spirit world. So people that are open tend to meddle with things as such. And that's when these energies or these spirits make themselves known. And then there's others who just are really shut off.
Right.
And we see this case with the Amityville house.
Oh.
You know, we had that one family that moved in right after the deaths, and they went through a hellstorm, moved out, and Lorraine Warren stated that, you know, the reason why they were experiencing all this is because they were open to all this stuff. They were open to spirituality, not to mention they were meddling with stuff like that.
Right.
And then the family that moved in right afterwards had documented saying that they don't experience anything. And then Elaine Warren describes this family as being not open. They're just not open to anything that we're involved in.
Right.
So that could be, you know, another reason why this gentleman who's living in this house right now is not experiencing a damn thing.
Well, and I think it's like, again, a word of the day apparently is like, it's an amalgamation. You bring your energy to something, your experience, and this is in every aspect of life, but you bring everything that you are, and if it happens to cross paths with something, like you were saying with the residual, where like maybe it's not his actual energy. Again, I don't know. I know so little or even know what I think about the paranormal because it's just like a big question mark. If it's just like the energy of the event that happened at that place, and it's just waiting for someone who's bringing their energy to kind of like, quote, unlock it, that would make a lot of sense to me. And then like if someone doesn't have that experience, hasn't had those things happen in their lives that make them even open to questioning, then it's not strong enough by itself maybe to like manifest. But it's like when you bring your energy to it, yes, it like creates the perfect storm in a sense.
Yeah, no, it's true. There's like a friend of mine was telling me about an article about auras. Certain people carry different energies that attract other energy. You also have people that don't even know they have psychic abilities. Whoa. And a lot of times this can manifest in, you know, other things as well. And in a lot of cases they even manifest in poltergeist activity. Yeah. It's insane. Oh my God. So with these individuals, like I've said before in other episodes, we all have an empathic sense, you know, whether it's, you know, at a level 1, which is the weakest, to a level 10, you know, we will still be able to either sense that something's there, feel that something's there, or even see or smell something that is there.
That gunpowder, that's so crazy.
The main thing that I notice is the same thing. Everyone's sensing and smelling the gunpowder. And for that second couple that moved in, they smelled a very, very intense scent of gunpowder. Wow. I mean, they thought like something was wrong with the house. There was even a point where they were trying to open up the windows. They even brought someone in to check the house. Maybe it was a gas leak, something. No, it was just constantly around them. Yeah.
That's so crazy.
But who knows? Who knows? I mean, I still believe that it could be a residual haunting. Sure. I believe that, you know, it was such a negative time, especially for him and what he was feeling. And this was such a trying and very violent era. And he went out in such a violent way. Yes. Yeah.
Oof. So, moral of the story, stay out of those. Don't go there. They're not worth it. Oh my goodness, that's so
But
crazy.
MTV portrayed it so, like, well.
All of those people are haunted for sure. They don't act like that without being haunted.
They're haunted by bad plastic surgery.
Yes, that explains so much. Look what happens.
Have you seen some of them? It's like botched lips, botched boobs.
Yeah.
I know. I know.
Early 2000s were a rough time.
They were a rough time. I made some really poor fashion choices.
Yeah, we all did.
We all did, yeah. Shall we take it to a close?
Let's do it.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to episode 3, which was the true crime and paranormal aftermath of George Reeves, aka OG Superman. Guys, you know where to find us. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Hollyweird Paranormal, and on Twitter, please follow us at HWP Podcast, okay? Also, if you have iTunes, don't forget to comment and subscribe, and also rate us whatever you want, whatever you feel. We don't mind.
We don't mind.
We don't mind at all.
Thick Superman, tough skin.
I know. I also want to do a shout out. I want to start doing these things where I'm going to have some spiritual bays of the week, and the two that that come to mind, there's 2. I want to give a shout out to Dark Divide Podcast. That's Bay with the True Crime Podcast. Thank you so much for the shout out on Twitter. I also want to give a shout out to I think it's Asian Madness Podcast. Yes, that's right. Asian Madness Podcast. And that is Bay with the true crime, paranormal, and lore stories based from the East. And they've been on my phone while I'm like pulling costumes in my shop. I've been like binge listening to them. Those 2 ladies are amazing. So go check them out. Show them some love. They're spiritual bays of the week. So... all right. Well, catch us next time, and always make sure to stay weird, guys.
Bye.
Bye.